Hello.
Hi, Deepa.
Hi, Devendra.
Yeah, thanks for making it.
No
So
problem.
the plan is that Richa will do the introduction and then the master class, and then in the end we'll announce the next info session when they can ask about the program and ISB in particular. So that's the flow that we are thinking about.
Okay, sounds good.
Sure. Richa, you want to get started? Richa, are you there?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Please get started. Deepa is there, so you can get started.
Yes, sure. I'll start. So hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on future of digital transformation. In these challenging times, we're all navigating through uncertainty for ourselves and our community. So we are hoping that you're staying safe and healthy. Thank you for signing up today and it's a pleasure to have you. My name is Richa and I'll be your moderator. Joining me in this session is Mr. Divyendu Bose, Director Admissions Financial Aid and Engagement. He's also a key contributor to all the strategic initiatives of the school. At the Indian School of Business, one develops a wealth of network through interactions with industry leaders, current students and ISB alums, and an opportunity to learn from the world-class faculty. That said, I'm pleased to introduce today's subject matter expert and an esteemed speaker, Professor Deepa, who's taken out time today to share her insights. Faculty in the Information Systems area and Research Fellow at the Indian School of Business. She's also the Executive Director of the Srini Raju Center for Technology and the Network Economy at ISB. Her research articles have been published in leading academic journals and extensively featured in referred conference proceedings, edited book chapters, and popular media outlets. She holds a Master's in Information System Management from Carnegie Mellon University and a PhD in Information System from University of Texas at Austin. Lastly, we'd love to hear from you during today's session. If you have a question for us, please feel free to post it in the chat window addressing to the panel. We'll be answering questions in between the session. In case we don't get your question, we will sure to follow up at the end of the session. So without any further ado, I'd like to kick off things by welcoming Professor Deepa. Professor, over to you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Richa. Hey, I'm going to turn on my video. Is that okay? Tell me what the format is, yeah? So I'm going to turn on. Can you see? 1 second. I'm in my office. Can you see it there?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm also going to share the PPT, so let's start with that. Loading.
Yes, visible now.
Presentation? Yeah,
Yes.
Loading file. Richa, I have about an hour, and
okay.
Does that make sense? An hour, is that how we start today? Okay.
Sure.
I just wanted to, I wanted to welcome all the attendees. Thank you so much for taking time during this time especially and, joining us for this session and logging in to hear me. And I wanted to, I thought this would be an interesting topic to discuss in these times. And I also, the way I wanted to set this up is I don't want to go for an hour without hearing from you or getting some interactions with you. So I'm going to have top points. Richa, I'm hoping that's okay, that format.
Yes,
so maybe we pause every 15 odd minutes and, I'll figure out an appropriate stopping point. And let's take questions and, make this as interactive a medium as we can,
sure.
as engaging as we can. Yeah?
Sure.
All right. So like Richa said, most of my research is in the space of information systems, information technology. I work closely with industry and government to try and understand the effects of tech on a range of outcomes in both business as well as in society. And as in that capacity as the director for the Tech Research Center, I do a lot of that. And it's also my attempt to try and bring that into the class as much as I can, which is also what I'm going to do today. What we're doing right now is perhaps, in some sense, reflective of the times. It's reflective of how technology is changing various industries. I think we're going to, in some sense, these changes are going to get amplified in the months to come, and definitely in the years to come. But I wanted to talk a little bit today. The way I've set it up is to give you a brief sense of how the world around us is changing and how those changes place technology at the forefront of strategy and innovation in businesses. And then we'll talk about why it's difficult for existing companies to change. What makes it difficult for them? And then we'll talk about, and that's the big part. I think, once the solutioning in some sense follows seamlessly, once you have a sense of what prevents us from changing. And once we have a sense of that, I'll then leave it with some takeaways and we can have a broader discussion at the end. Let me start with, I'm going to try and stay away from opinions and try and bring in as much data as possible. But let me start with this, which is the first assumption that I have for you, or the first observation that I have for you and I wanted to present to you, is that software is eating up the world. It's a bit of a hyperbole, but what it reflects is that software is fundamentally changing industries, it's fundamentally changing businesses across the world. And if I ask you, and of course, we're not engaging in that much of a dialogue, but if you reflect on this, if you think about who's the largest book retailer in the world today, Amazon, right? It's a tech company. If we think about who's the largest video services distributor today, we're again thinking companies like Netflix, etc., right? Which are again technology companies. If we talk about who dominates the music landscape, are you thinking companies like Sony and EMG, or are you thinking, companies like, again, Apple and Pandora and Spotify and a bunch of companies that have actually are technology companies that have come to dominate the landscape? If we ask where are the leading innovations in financial services come from, we have to then accept to the table innovations like blockchain and crypto and a whole bunch of technology, digital payments, a whole bunch of technology-led innovations. If we ask have WhatsApp and Skype, are they legitimate competitors in the telecom industry? Then, we may pause and think about their scale of operations, but then if we observe that they've shaved off $386 to $500 billion of the top line of leading telecom players, then we need to accept them as legitimate competitors in this space. The idea that Mark Andreessen was putting forth when he said this was fairly simple. What he was trying to say is that technology and technology-enabled business models are rapidly emerging as key competitors across a diverse set of industries. And why is this important? It's because these business models start to change businesses and the face of competition in industries where they come to play a part. For instance, if you think about maybe you can type your answers and I can see this over here, right? But if I ask you what is the product in the auto industry, what would you tell me? Deepa, can I see the chat somewhere? Okay, I got a few. The product, if you think about what's the product in the auto industry, you're telling me automobiles, you're telling me engine maps, you're telling me cars, you're telling me Tesla. and you're telling me cars again. The product, if you think about it, you're telling me the product is a car in the auto industry. And if you think about it, the product for the longest time was a car, right? But then along comes Uber. And when Uber comes along, it starts to change the product in that industry. Because now the product in the auto industry is not just a car, right? What would you say it is in the light of companies like Uber that come along? It's a service, correct? It's getting from one place to another. One of you is saying transportation, someone saying mobility, and that's exactly what it is. The product is no longer the car. If you tell Uber, Uber is not in the business of cars. Uber is in the business of transportation. It's in the business of mobility, and that's what you start to see in the auto industry, right? And when these technology companies come in, they start to change products. They start to change services because they operate with different business models. And a General Motors or a Ford or a Toyota or a Mahindra or whoever, the traditional auto players know how to compete with each other, but they don't know how to compete with an Uber. They don't know very well how to compete with a Tesla. And now the competition starts to get incredibly interesting. And therefore, the first assumption that I submit to you in saying that this is a phenomenon that we must understand is because this is happening at speed and scale. Right? You have new business models and new tech companies that are entering diverse industries with impunity. The second assumption that I submit to you is that technology is not just changing industries, it's changing traditional business functions. What this chart is, the left one that you see there, which is going up like that, the blue line, what that's telling you is that traditionally, the first, between somewhere until the mid-90s or so, around 5 to 8% of patents in an average company's portfolio used to be information technology patents. Today, 45 to 50% of patents in the average company's tech portfolio are tech patents. And think about this. What I'm saying is earlier, somewhere in the 80s, the car companies, since we talked about them, the Fords and the General Motors and the Toyotas, 8% of their patents used to be tech patents. Today, it is 45%. What does that tell you about how the auto industry has evolved? What does that tell you? You won't have mobility. So, what it's telling you, and I'm also keeping track of your questions, okay? So I'll come to this at some point. Technology is driving business, yes. Every business is being driven by tech at the core. They're becoming tech savvy. I'm reading out some of the comments that are coming in, right? So there's huge application of IT in businesses and services. There's huge application of IT in products. That's correct. Earlier, your product used to be a car, which was a bundle of mechanical components, 10% IT patents. Today, when 50% of your patents are tech patents, and these patents, where do they find expression? They find expression in products and services. And therefore, what is happening is that your products are becoming technology. The product today, your car, is essentially software. It's not a bunch of mechanical components. It's a bunch of software. Software navigates you, software entertains you, software communicates, software takes you from point A to point B. It's all software. Right? So your product is now fundamentally changing. This is R&D, but this is true of every single function. The graph on the right, what we did is, we took these 3 million patents issued by the US Patent, and then we said, oh, if patent A cites patent B, we'll draw a link between it. And then in this inter-citation network, we'll see which industry is most central to innovation. And lo and behold, the orange line is the IT industry. If the IT industry comes down, the entire system of innovation across industries is affected. You can do the same thing for the marketing function. If I ask you, is word of mouth an intangible concept? You'll probably say yes. But your customers are chatting, and they're leaving trails behind. So what I've done here with the patent network, you can do with customer chatter. You can draw a customer chatter network. You can see who are the central customers. You can look at the degree of influence of these customers. And lo and behold, marketing is now transformed. Every single function is being transformed through technology. And the question I have for you, right, so far, what I've told you is that technology is changing companies, industries, and technology is changing business functions. So did electricity. Think about it. Any general purpose technology that's come about so far has transformed companies and industries. Electricity, when it came about, it transformed industries, right? It made them so much more productive. It transformed business functions. It transformed manufacturing. It just fundamentally transformed industries and functions. Is technology like electricity? If you answer yes, we should not study it. And I won't have much to say to you. So you have to tell me, is technology, is information technology, the kinds of changes I'm talking to you, is it just like any other general purpose technology? Is it like electricity? Chat a little with me. Why not? There are at least 8 of you saying no. Tell me why not. I have like no, 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 no. Tell me why not. Electricity is essentially a utility. Maybe with some technologies, maybe with AI. And I think when you're saying that, this is with some technologies, you're essentially saying that technology, the argument here, which some of you were saying electricity is a utility, but IT is not. We have to think about why it's not. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to lead to numerous use cases. It's going to transform business functions. All of those are indicative of one similarity to electricity, which is that technology is ubiquitous. It's going to power changes across diverse industries, which means it's probably a general purpose technology. It's not a sector specific technology, right? Information technology has diverse impacts, which means it powers innovation across sectors, and it leads to complementary innovations in those sectors. So I create an innovation which creates other innovations in those sectors, which is what electricity and GPTs do. However, there is a big difference. Think about it. If you didn't have electricity in your organization, you are disadvantaged in a very fundamental way, right? If you don't have it, you're going to be disadvantaged. Your productivity will come down much more than other organizations, and you're going to be disadvantaged. However, having electricity in your organization does not uniquely advantage you in any fundamental way. You're not gaining competitive advantage by having electricity or utilities in your organization. Observe that? I'm going to again say, correct. Correct. It's strategic. Some of you are saying it's strategic. So the way you're going to do this is, Ruchika makes a point, it's going to be everywhere. It's hygiene, right? This is how you're going to view it. However, just if you don't have it, it's a disadvantage, but having it doesn't strategically advantage you in any unique way, unlike technology. Technology is fundamentally different, and let me show you a slide which shows you how different it is, right? So this is a slide I like. This is a slide that tells you this is not like electricity. So what this slide tells you is that technology is a source of competitive advantage. Let me just explain to you, but I'm just going to put the point of the slide across so that you absorb it while I'm talking about it, okay? This slide makes the point that IT is not like electricity. IT is a source of competitive advantage. It leads to competitive differences in industries. That's what the point of this slide is. What these authors did essentially was, it's a bit dated, it's till 2005, but if you see the Brynjolfsson paper, it's till 2013. If you go on the site, it has data up to 2014. Up to 2013, and then they have, the site continues to track data till date. They look at, what they said was, look at the gray line and the red line, okay? So it tells you, and look at the time points on the graph. You can see 65, 75, 85. Somewhere in 95, you see, there was a period of significant innovation in corporate IT. You remember what happened in the late 90s? The internet came along, enterprise systems, all of that started to happen. Correct. But what happened is that I'm also, one second, let me just, I'm going to tack your questions, okay? I'm not going to ignore them. I'll come back to them again in a bit. But let me make this point first. What happened in the late 90s, like I said, was a period of significant innovation. The internet came along, enterprise systems, a bunch of things came along. And at that time, the first two changes that I talked about, new tech companies, new tech business models, new changes, tech-enabled changes to business functions, all of these started to happen in certain industries. The red line: retail, financial services, healthcare. These industries saw a lot more of the first two things that we talked about. Like in financial services, Charles Schwab came. In the music industry, you had a bunch of companies that came. In retail, you had a bunch like Amazon. So there were a bunch of new tech companies, new tech-enabled business models that started to come into these industries. They also started to make significant investment in transforming their business functions. The gray line, not so much. Textiles, rubber, chemicals, not so much. In the red line, the minute this started to happen, the competitive dynamics started to look very, very different. Average productivity went up significantly. Okay, in the red line, keep these facts in mind. Investment in IT went up significantly from $2,000 to let's say $8,000 per US worker. Average productivity went up significantly, which is it went from some 2.5 to 5.5. So average productivity went up significantly. So far, story is like electricity. Everyone spent on electricity, everyone's productivity went up. However, what is interesting is the red line. The variance around the mean performance looked very, very different, and it was significant. This red line here shows you the difference between the winners and the losers. The top 25th in that industry versus the bottom 25th. And you see the spread started to increase. Winners started to win big, losers started to lose big. A similar chart for volatility shows a similar drift. Volatility in these industries started to increase significantly. Performance spread started to increase significantly. In other words, it wasn't just mean productivity, but variance. Different organizations were gaining differently, suggesting that IT was not a leveler. It was a source of competitive advantage which different organizations benefited differently from. The ones who got it won big and benefited big. The ones who lost big. If this was like electricity, the red line would go up, but then again it would come down. After learning, everybody learns, everyone was similar, it would again come back to being a leveler. Never happens. The line goes up and up and up and up all the way up to 2030. Capability building was cumulative. You got enterprise, you got the internet. If you got the internet, you got analytics. You got analytics, you got online business. It was cumulative capability building. You miss the boat once, in some sense you were done for, right? So that's what you see with this. Technology changes business functions, it changes industries, and it is a distinctive source of competitive advantage. I talked about Charles Schwab. Just to give you an example of this, 1997, Charles Schwab comes into financial services industry, makes online online trading free, accessible to all. It had 1/3 the assets under its management as Merrill Lynch, but its market cap would now be the same as Merrill Lynch, right? It's gone up. Merrill strikes back. Within 3 months, Merrill says, hey, this is online trading, it's commoditized. Let me do something for my investment advisors, which is unique. So they take tech, build the most complex wealth management platform, and they create a killer wealth management system that leverages technology. Merrill's market cap is back. See, volatility. Charles Schwab says, oh, this is the future, it's getting commoditized. They acquire US Trust, they build a similar wealth management platform, and they get into investment advisory business. Volatility. Market cap is back. You see the volatility in these industries. New tech business model, new business changes, volatility. And for every Schwab and Merrill that got it, millions perished, hundreds perished. And that's the performance spread. The winners started to win big, the losers started to lose big, right? Establishing that technology is a distinctive source of competitive advantage. And the world we're living in is not the world you see on the left. Tech is not a support function. It's not a separate function. It doesn't just drive automation, and it's not just a cost center. If that's your view of the world, we are so not future ready. Tech is a strategic partner. It needs to be integrated with business strategy. It drives information and innovation, and it is a key competitive asset in today's business. And I'm going to pause at this point and take a couple of questions. This, in some sense, is the foundation for courses in digital transformation that I teach. My assumptions are threefold, right? That this is how tech changes industries and business functions. This is the new world of tech, and it's a distinctive source of competitive advantage. And what I'm going to tell you next is why firms don't get it. Okay, but before that, I'm going to pause a little and I'm going to take your questions. I already have a few. Let me just take this. Okay, do you have any questions at this point, or I will move on. I'm just going to take one which. Can we have the latest data? So the graph is from the paper itself. One of you has asked about latest data. The graph is about from the paper, and hence it's dated. But like I said, if you go to Eric Benjolson's site and you go to McAfee's site, they have the latest data based on the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So that should be available right up, and they've drawn the graph up to 2014. After that, the data is out there. Like I said, it looks exactly the same. It's something that goes up and up and up. Okay. Sales and automobile industry. So sectoral specific ones are going to be difficult to talk about. But what I will say is at the end of this, you're going to at least have a framework to think about how any industry, not just automobile, not just a business function of sales, but how any business functions, a template to think about how functions and industries will be transformed. High intensive, which sectors were taken into account? So high IT intensive industries were industries like healthcare, financial. So the question is why high IT intensive industries, which sectors were taken into account? The sectors that were taken into account were retail, healthcare, financial services. Those were the high IT. The low IT were things like textiles, old world manufacturing largely. But keep in mind that these are also trend lines for industry. It could be that the actual, like in the cement industry, you have a Cemex that did very well. All right, so these are trend lines for industries, but there are outliers in terms of firms even within that. AI is eating software. What are your thoughts about it? We'll talk about AI at the very end. We see a lot of resistance to tech. How do we penetrate with cascading? I'm going to talk about that as well. The framework will talk to you about how do we counter resistance to tech in companies, especially old world companies. Does it mean for entrepreneurs it is almost mandatory to partner with a tech partner? It's an incredibly interesting question, and why don't we hold on this, because I'm going to present to you a framework about why it's going to be difficult why it is difficult for organizations to respond, and hopefully the clarity will emerge as we do this. Okay, so let me move on to the framework then. Imagine this is the year. 1897, okay? And your boss comes to you with a deceptively simple question. Your boss, he or she in those times more likely to be a he, says, Alexander Graham Bell has invented a way to transmit voice over wire. What shall we do about it? Western Union at that time dismissed Bell as a toy. Right? And Western Union was not the first company to do this, and it was certainly not the last. The most persistent trend in management research the most persistent documented trend in management research is the inability of companies to recognize when technologies and markets change and how they must respond to it. Right? It's the failure of Sears gave way to a Walmart. Not one of the mini computer companies survived the personal computer companies. Not most of the independent disk drive companies that existed in the 70s are obsolete today. Blockbuster, you see with Netflix, you see Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and you see a bunch of changes even here in this part of the world, right? And all of these are reflective of this disruption that I'm talking about. It's not an opinion I want to reiterate. I want to reiterate that this is something which management researchers have studied and documented. It is the most persistent trend in business, the inability of an incumbent to change when markets and technologies change. One must ask why. It's an important question to ask because it also tells us, and some of you have asked the questions, why are companies resistant to it? It's not just in old world industries in general. Like why are they resistant to it? What is it that these companies see coming? And sometimes we think that digital transformation is about the coolest technologies. It's about the newest technologies. It's about emerging technologies. It's about blockchain and AI and IoT and a bunch of tech. It is not. I will submit to you today that it is not about the technology. It is about a way of doing business. And what I want to explore with you, I'm going to put forth a framework to you that was developed by Clayton Christensen at Harvard Business School. And the framework is one of the many frameworks, although a hugely popular one, that explains why companies miss this. Okay? Type for me like a couple of things that you think are at play here. Right? What is it that leads companies into into resisting transformation? I mean, it could be, you can think about anything, right? You can think about bookstore, and then you can think about why Amazon is dominating the way it is today. You could think about the music industry and how it perished. You could think about the car industry, automobile, and the trouble it is in. You could think about any industry you want. Think about us and the industry that we are in. You can think about any of these, right? And tell me a little bit about why you think that's the case. I just want a couple of responses, okay? And then I'm going to read out some of the things I guess you can see. Some of you have addressed it to all. Why fix something that's not broken? They don't listen to customers. That's an important one, okay? Keep that in mind, Rohit said. They don't listen to customers. Resistant to change. Existing assets hard to liquidate. Okay. CapEx is required, and essentially large investments are required. And they don't understand technology. Okay, so if I have to bucket your responses, I'm seeing these 3-4 themes. Okay, one of it is a general resistance to change from leadership. They believe they know it all. They believe they have something that's working. Why fix something that's not broken? So that's that whole resistant to change theme. The second seems to be investments, and so there's complacency and all of that comes with that. The second seems to be also an affinity to status quo, but not coming from a general behavioral resistance, but coming from, you are saying, investments, costs, transformation, capabilities. Essentially, it's a resource-based argument. Firms don't have the resources to make this change. Okay, so that's the second theme that I'm saying. Either they didn't have competencies, they don't have the resources, either the capital investments, the money, whatever. They don't have that. The third thing that I'm seeing is they don't have the vision for it. They've just been in this business for so long, they don't know what to do with technology. Like you're saying, they don't understand the landscape, they don't understand the problem that new technology solves, they don't know how they can use this new technology, all of that, right? So there's that element of, I don't know how to use this technology, and also it's too risky. I don't know where this is going to go. And so it's too risky for me to make this transformation at a large scale. Okay, so those are the three themes that I'm seeing here. Keep these in mind. Keep these in mind when I drop the framework. Okay? So Clayton Christensen observed the demise of this company called digital computers, digital equipment. It was this large mini computer company. And through the 70s, digital was lauded for being on top of its game. Right? This company churned out mini computer after mini computer. It sold at 250,000 a piece. It was this incredibly well oiled supply chain and making 45% margins on top of their game. Somewhere in the 90s, digital began to unravel. Right? It started to unravel, and the very same people who said, "Oh, what an incredible company," were now talking about how this company didn't get it. It didn't have the vision for tech. It didn't have the ability to make a shift, all of that. And Christensen wondered, how can a company go from being so bad to so good, so good to so bad in just like a decade or so? After all, this is a company that owned the market. How can it go from being so good to so bad in such a short period of time? Right? He wondered about it. And so he flipped it on his head and he said, maybe it's not something about bad management, but it's something about good management that leads us into this kind of trouble. And the framework that he came up with is something called the Disruptive Innovation Framework. That's what I'm going to present to you. There are a few elements in this. Let me start with the first one. The first assumption is that every single company is traversing a performance trajectory over time. Okay, you see the time on the x-axis, performance. So every point on that slope there, every point on that slope is some utility bundle, where at that point on that slope, every point is some utility. It's a collection of features, it's a collection of product features, service features that is speaking to customer utility and also to the margins of the company. Right? So that's what you're seeing on that line there, every point. And each year, the company is making it better and better and better and better. Right? So that's what it is. And as the company traverses and makes it better and better and better and better, it also earns higher and higher and higher margins. Right? So that's what you're seeing as it moves across that slope. Now, the first assumption, at some point, every company, your company, my company, every company is doing this, right? Every year they're making their products better and better over time, serving their best customers and increasing their margins. At some point, you begin to overserve the market, right? And when you begin to overserve the market, you want to think about this is the line, this is the slope, and you want to draw like, a flat line here, which means this area between that flat line and the slope. Okay, let me draw it like this. If you have a flat line here, some area between the flat line and the slope is you over-serving the market, which means that there is a mainstream expectation of the market which is here, and you've started to overshoot it. You've exceeded the ability of the market to absorb your product at that performance cost ratio. Think about what percent of Excel's features do we use, right? If this was a real question, and I asked you what percent of Excel's features do we use, right? Probably, if you have to take a wild guess, none. Someone said none. 10%. Not even 5% is accurate. Not 50%. Not nowhere near 50%. We use actually, 3 to 4% is what is accurate. Okay, so we're using 3 to 4% of Excel's features, but you're building a product. That's more and more features, which your mainstream market is not really absorbing. The more you charge for this product, each year as you add features that they don't use and you charge for it, you will find willingness to pay of customers starting to decrease. You will find some element of consumer preferences starting to shift. You'll see all these changes in the market if you're looking and listening. And at that time, your market is ripe for disruption. Right? The second element is the disruption itself. The market is ripe for disruption, and along comes a disruptor ready to do its job. Why have I put the disruptor there? What are the implications of putting the disruptor there? Why do you think I put it there? Some good points coming in. They provide, let's see, customers do not expect all features that an incumbent has from the disruptor, not quite. Provide basic services at nominal cost. Remember here, you're keeping the incumbent thing in mind. Has high potential for growth, not obvious at the entry at least. Technology will pull it up, no. This is the point which is correct, right? Someone, Survey says, the disruptor is serving well below what the leader is. And that is all that is clear from this graph. Remember, there's only one axis, performance. It's not clear that customer just needs that much. It's not clear about market readiness. It's not clear whether this is going to grow, whether technology will pull it up. None of it is staring at you in the graph. What is staring at you in the graph is this one point that Surabhi makes, which is the disruptor is well below what the leader is. You are the incumbent. You're traversing that graph like this. And the disruptor comes in at that point, which is well below your performance trajectory. What are the implications of that? It's an inferior product. The disruptor is an inferior product in its origin. Relative to you, its performance is here, right? So it's an inferior product in its origin. What are the implications of that? What are the implications of that product being an inferior product? Not lower costs, not necessarily at least, not necessarily. Correct. Correct. Abhishek makes a good point. He says the company will ignore the product, which is useful to think about. And some of you are making this point as well, that the leader does not consider. Keep in mind, you are the incumbent and you're on this trajectory here, and your disruptor comes along at this point. If it meets you on that slope there, on that trajectory, you will take notice. You will respond to this competition. But it comes here at this price point where you're not going to take notice, right? Because keep in mind, let me go back to digital, right? Digital is on that slope. It is going up. Digital is selling 150 to 200K a mini computer. It's making 45% margins. It's selling to large corporations. That's digital. Here comes the first personal computer, which is Apple II. It is sold as a toy in schools. It's sold for $1,500 and it earns margins of 10 to 15%. It is a way inferior product. And when it comes in, digital looks down at the product and says, should I invest in a product that none of my existing customers will buy, which will erode my margins significantly, or should I continue to stay course and build products for my existing customer base that will increase my margins, revenues, and profit? What would you respond as a good leader? Not as a bad one, as a good leader. What are you going to pick? You will pick to stay course. Okay. So you pick to stay course, and because you do that, you ignore the disruptor. The disruptor is sneaky. It doesn't meet you at your performance trajectory. It doesn't meet you at a point where you are incentivized to respond. It meets you at an inferior point where you are not incentivized to respond and you're going to ignore it. The first Amazon website, gray and blue clunky website, Barnes & Noble, brilliant stores. You drink your coffee, you perhaps buy a book. Books are an experience good. What does this gray and blue clunky website do when it comes in? It makes books a search good. Minor, subtle shift in behavior wrapped, a powerful shift in behavior wrapped in a gray and blue clunky website. Barnes & Noble ignores it. But the hallmark, same thing with digital, right? What is this Apple II? Oh, it's sold as a toy in schools. Ignore it. Uber mobility, it's a taxi service. We are in the business of cars, luxury cars. Ignore it. This is what happens typically with disruptions, right? You ignore the disruptor because it doesn't even seem as a product in your industry. It comes sometimes from non-adjacent industries, which is another thing to keep in mind, okay? That disruptors, like a smartphone, not necessarily disruptive to the PC, sorry, not disruptive to other phone manufacturers, but very disruptive to the PC, perhaps. An e-book reader, perhaps not disruptive to traditional book retailing, but very disruptive to the publishing industry. You see, this is non-adjacent competition. You're not looking and you're not scanning the environment in your industry. You're looking beyond, and therefore it tends to become important. Okay. So that's the second aspect of it, that it is inferior and it sneaks up on you. The third aspect of the disruptor, it doesn't stay where it starts. If it stays where it starts, it's just another segment, but it doesn't stay where it starts. You will start to add features around that core product, which will start to evolve in your direction, in the incumbent's direction. And as it builds features, as it wraps it, it starts to move in the incumbent's direction, ultimately disrupting the entire industry out of the water. And when it comes in, it addresses a very real unserved need in the market, the personal computer. When it came in, what need do you think it addressed? It came in at that point, it was inferior, but what was the real need that it addressed, the personal computer, relative to mini computers in the industry? Word processing. The real need that it addressed, exactly. The need that it addressed was that it brought computing into the homes of individuals. Until that point, if you had any computing needs or processing needs, you would take it to a nearby processing center, these would get processed in batch, and then that's how it works, right? But here, it brought computing into the homes of individuals, and in that sense, it was different, right? So that's what you see with the personal computer, and the PC didn't stay where it started. Now it would add analytical features, it would add productivity features, it would start to grow. And as it grew, it started to slowly but surely gas the entire mini computer industry out of business. And this is what you see with bookstores and Amazon. You see this with a bunch of industries. What starts to happen is that the disruptor then starts to move. The final layer is the business model. Once that disruptor or ecosystem of disruptors gets the business model right, the incumbent will be either reinvented or disrupted. And in that movement, some of the questions you asked earlier, do we have to collaborate with tech companies? Do we have to collaborate? That's the period zone of chaos, as I call it. That's where you will see a lot of non-traditional alliances, non-traditional movements, collaborative alliances. A bunch of things start to happen in that space as this disruptor starts to move. The final layer, keep in mind, is the business model. And once the business model is drawn, the entire industry gets reinvented. Any questions at this point? What percent of margin should have a product to consider? What percent margin should a product have to consider as a considerable? I'm sorry, Satya, I don't understand that question. Can you rephrase that, please? I wasn't sure. Do you mean? What do you do to take care of disruptors is a good one, and with no convincing answer. There are many things that you could potentially. that question also assumes that it's easy to identify disruptors. It's not. It's a tough one to identify a disruptor. And Ullas asks this next question: how would one know who is a disruptor? It's very difficult. And what you need to do essentially is look for shifts in your own market. Are performance cost ratios in your market changing? Are customers, your sales to these customers or your top customers is flat, but your share of their purchases is declining? In the sense they're also buying from elsewhere. Who else are they buying from? So there is a bunch of these fundamentals that you will start to observe shifting in your industry. You will see emergence of new players, right? So these are all elements of who are the disruptors. How do you respond to them? If you can acquire them and they are willing to be acquired, acquisitions are a strategy. Else you have to engage in experimentation. You have to engage in collaboration. There's one dictum that I would put out for the digital economy: you cannot do it alone. You just cannot. You have to either orchestrate an ecosystem or at worst participate in one. So you need to be doing that, right? So those are some elements of how do you respond to them. And you see this experimentation, right? And you see non-traditional collaborations. For instance, I do this custom program for Novartis, and one of the things they say is, oh, we have this collaboration with Google Life Sciences, but we don't trust them. Of course you don't trust them, right? You don't. These are non-traditional collaborations which must not be trusted. What is happening in that alliance is Google learning about the pharma business, and therefore it's imperative that the incumbent be learning about the technology business model and how you can use these business models, be it platforms and data, each of which is a class unto itself, to connect closely with the customer and learn about the customer. So all of those are, in some sense, elements of disruption and how you respond to them. We're talking examples like Apple, many disruptive ideas shaped into products. Many ideas shaped into products, but they were not successful. Yes. So to Shirisha's point, yes, and which is what makes disruption so difficult to understand, because you are. This is why I'm saying it's not a technology problem. Digital could have built. I want to take your focus away from the tech, right? Since you brought up Apple, Shirisha, I will talk about Apple, right? So if you think about it, there were many MP3 players in the market. Digital could have designed keep in mind, a personal computer with its eyes shut. It was not about the technology. This was not about the technology. This was about a business model, right? So if you talk about Apple, if you remember the MP3, right? The MP3 came along and it essentially started to disrupt the traditional music industry. And the early variants of the MP3, the first disruptors, that first point which came along on that slope, the first point was the peer-to-peer systems like Napster, etc. They shut down Napster, right? And then at that point, then the other peer-to-peer systems would come along. The Kazas and the BitTorrents and all of those of the world would come along. And then those also, you would sue these folks and you would shut them down as well. This chaos continued for a while, And do you remember what the response of the recording industry was through all of this time? It was a period of like 5 to 6 years. Do you remember what the recording industry's response was? We don't remember because they didn't have a response, right? The only response that they had was through the platform providers, correct? Or you, heaven forbid, you actually ended up suing your customers because it wasn't working in terms of suing the providers. They started suing the customers. That's the level of chaos that exists. This went on till Apple brought some sense into this whole business. And if you look at it, there were many MP3 players. There were many technologies out there for digital music. But Apple did something very clever and its market cap, which is an iconic product that it launched, which one of the first iconic products that would take its market cap from $1 billion to $150 billion or so. But this product was what is Apple's iconic product that you think disrupted the music industry? iPod, correct. iPod, iTunes. I got one iTunes, okay? If you look at iPod and iTunes, it's interesting, and I say this is a business model shift because the iTunes, you know, the 99 cents or whatever, how much do you think of that 99 cents Apple keeps? Let's just guess, 30%, okay, 90%. Here's what Apple does as far as music is concerned. Okay, 70% would go to the recording companies, 20% would go to the credit card companies. Shilpa, that's a greater than 100 total. But anyway, so that you've got like 70 going to the recording companies, 20 going to the credit card companies. And Apple, you take away direct and indirect costs, Apple is left with nothing on the iTunes, on that 99 cents. Because Apple is not in the business of music. Apple is in the business of devices. The quarter that they would launch the iTunes, the beginning of that quarter, they would sell 150,000 iPods a quarter. But at the end of that quarter, they would be selling something like 850,000 iPods a quarter. So what you're looking at over here is a business model that was incredibly clever. There were many MP3 players, there were many digital music players, but what Apple did was that it took that technology and wrapped it in an incredibly clever business model. A business model where the recording companies were happy because they were getting their 70 cents. The customers were happy because they were getting legit quality music. And Apple was incredibly happy because now they had created a razor and blade model in reverse. The variable good, which is the iTunes, would now be the loss leader for the durable good, the iPod. A razor and blade model in reverse, right? That's what they had created. And now the music industry would be fundamentally reinvented. The recording companies were getting their 70 cents. However, they would never innovate in the history of music again. You know, they made the vinyl, they made the cassettes, they made the CDs, boom. And now they would never innovate ever again in the history of music. They have ceded that place to the technology companies. And this, in some sense, is that journey that I'm talking about. You get that business model, you're done. So this is not about tech at all. I want you to shift focus from that, right? So this is about a business model. And what you're seeing here is an example of just that. So what is the solution for incumbents? You need to be looking at experimentation. You need to first acknowledge and examine and scan for disruption. And once you've done that, you need to be experimenting. You need to be working out non-traditional alliances. You need to be building resources, processes, and capabilities through a separate organization, right? Because you can't be who you are and create this new environment and this new business model. So you need to be doing that. Those are all some of the elements that need to be happening with disruption. And let me just close this and I'll take the remainder questions. What you're seeing here essentially with disruption, if you look at this slide, is that every company is embedded in a set of resources, processes, and values, right? And if you're able to leverage those resources, processes, and values, if you're able to leverage who you are as a company, and then respond to an innovation, it is a sustaining innovation. Like, for instance, we talked about, let's say you have a Barnes & Noble, they have a fleet of stores. They have inventory management processes. They have the value that books are an experience good. Similarly, the mini computer companies, right? They had a large sales force that sold direct, that's a resource. You had a complex process for sales. You had values, which was, I will earn 45% margins on my products. All of these were resources, processes, and values. If you were able to preserve them and respond to an innovation, that is a sustaining innovation. However, if you have to fundamentally change who you are as an organization to respond to an innovation, you have to change all of these elements, then it is a disruptive innovation, right? And that's what you're looking at. And disruptive innovations are far, far more complex to respond to than sustaining innovations. Okay, and that's what I wanted to leave you with as far as, and I'm going to take all your questions. I can see a bunch of them. What can you do? And look, so I want you to think about the wording, right? Typically, an industry had your industry incumbents, as I call them, incumbents. It's the likes of ISB providing education. It's the likes of the Fords and the Mahindras making cars, or the Toyota. It's the likes of any industry, leading banks and financial services providing financial services. All of these are incumbents. In much of the industrial economy, they competed with each other, with companies that looked like them. They operated on principles of supply-side economies of scale. That nice average cost comes down, allowing you to set lower prices, which allows you to further reduce costs to scale, further low prices, nice virtuous cycle, supply-side economies of scale. None of that works with the new players. These are platform models, two-sided markets. They quickly stitch together resources. There is no capital investment. They operate on the principles of computer science and data, customer centricity, and they have a fundamentally different way of competition, which is a subject of a 2-hour class unto itself for me. But that's how they, typically operate, right? So how do you respond? So now you have not just industry incumbents, your competitors also include that bubble that I put below, which is digital entrepreneurs and technology giants. These are the new competitors in the digital economy. Digital entrepreneurs are sector-specific business models, like an OYO or an Airbnb in hospitality, an Uber in cars, Netflix in media. Those are tech entrepreneurs, digital entrepreneurs. In addition, you have digital giants, who are the Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, the GAFA mafia, as they are called, the large tech companies which are there in every sector. Right? They hugely diversified, operate in every sector. Those are the digital giants. And the incumbents, therefore, in responding to these, must think about what is their strategy for response. At the very least, experimentation, collaboration, cooperation, acquisitions, all of these are strategies in response. And only if you're doing that when business models collide is the industry able to reinvent itself. Otherwise, it's likely to be disrupted. Okay, so let me pause there. That ends at least the section on disruption. Keep in mind that this is a story of captivity by customers. Okay, you're talking about strong captivity by customers here. That's what you're talking about. And I'm going to take a set of questions before continuing. 1 second. Richard, how much time do I have? I mean, how long do you?
Deepa, you can go on for another half an hour. Not an issue.
Okay. Yeah, Professor, you can take another 30-40 minutes.
Okay. Okay, so let me just take some of these questions. What are the key features of disruptors that market leaders would look for to collaborate or partner at an idea level? Well, disruptors are typically not looking to collaborate, keep in mind. If you're able to acquire them, that's, because they're resource constrained, that's one option. But in a high growth market, typically they are neither willing to be acquired nor, collaborate very much. You could collaborate with them, like, you have all these non-traditional collaborations, Toyota partnering with an Uber, General Motors with a Lyft, even, so, I mean, lots of these non-traditional collaborations, Ola, that we're looking at. And the idea there is you have to be very clear about what is it that the disruptor is learning from you, the incumbent, and what the incumbent is learning from the disruptor. So that becomes very important to look for, and those kinds of collaborations you have to tread with caution. It's not like a pharma company drawing up an alliance with a university or an R&D lab. This is a pharma company drawing up an alliance with a company that is looking to change the product in the pharma sector from blockbuster medicine to personalized medicine. So when this is the nature of collaboration, you need to think about, you need to think about what is it that you are learning, and what you are typically learning is the new business model and the capabilities required. What kind of search engine would disrupt Google? Actually, the disruption of Google, Ashwin, is a class unto itself, because I will have to talk about the business model of Google, which is platforms. And platforms, actually, the biggest disruption to Google was encountered in 2007 when Apple introduced the iPhone. And that's a fascinating, it's how Google successfully beat disruption. For instance, you had Google was based about browser-based search. Apple came in, disintermediated the browser, made search app-based. This was a huge threat to Google. 2007, in June, this product was launched, the iPhone. By 2007, November, Google had a response with Android, and a response that was true to its spirit as an advertiser. It didn't care about devices, so it made the devices free and opening up the ecosystem. It's a class unto itself, but let me just say there's been lots of disruption that Google's faced and which it's responded to. What's the importance of ability for an organization to experiment and fail, be resilient? It's incredibly important. I'm going to talk a little bit about it when I talk to you about GE, okay? I'm going to spend 10 minutes on GE, which is a fascinating case of an incumbent that dared to respond. We'll talk about that in just a second, and you'll see fear of failure is a big one, but you want to scratch that sentiment a little more, Chika, and ask what is driving that fear of failure. These are rational companies, right? So what is it? And the mindset, increasingly, this topic of mindset is coming up. And, it's scary how organizations develop a fixed mindset over time. There's something in research called the competency trap, which is like two curves. Let me make sure I'm seeing this correctly. I don't know how it shows up in my video. So you have a curve that looks like this, okay? So let me draw it. So it goes like this. It's an upward sloping curve, which is competency. Over time, competency of an organization increases, adaptability decreases, right? So you have adaptability going down, and then you have competency going up. It's called the competency trap. Organizations get better and better at what they do, but they get less and less adaptive to new situations. And therefore, it becomes, and I don't know if you've heard of this, y'all can like click in response or something, but there's a CMM level 5. I don't know if you've heard of, right? A lot of IT organizations used to have a CMM level 5 certification, yeah, and yeah, a lot of people recognize it. Yeah. And for me, the CMM, it was a standard that was invented by Carnegie Mellon, and they said, if you need a level 1, level 2, up to level 5. And each level indicates your ability to deliver a high quality product through standardization. But it is also a billboard for I cannot innovate. I'm caught in a competency trap, right? Because you standardize your processes so much, you've beaten into the box so much that you just cannot think outside the box at all. So these are all examples of these trade-offs that start to come in terms of competency traps. So how you change the mindset becomes an important one. Won't it be too late till we can see actual changes in elements? It's a very good question from Shriban. He asks, won't it be too late till we can actually see changes in elements like performance cost ratio? What shall we focus on to identify when see, if there was a recipe for this, it won't be a source of competitive advantage. It is a source, your ability to identify disruptive sources is a source of competitive advantage precisely because there is no recipe for identification of it. And it is an ambiguous process. So that's what makes it, what it is. In the banking, a relatively high percentage, high critical shifting. Sure. So I want to move the discussion a little away from tech also, right? Because I think you can look at any tech and it will fit into this model. And I'll talk about another tech, which is GE's IoT model, but a lot of this fits into that. Okay? So how do we manage change under disruptions? I think I responded to that. Is digital disruption creating a need for R&D investments in India? With or without disruptions, I think there is a need for R&D investments in India. Our innovation landscape is somewhat underwhelming. We spend very little of our GDP on R&D, and also if you look at patents. For instance, nearly 60% of patents in China are indigenous. It's not a good time to talk about China, but nevertheless. And in India, 15% of patents are indigenous. Most of these are filed by MNCs, and also a bulk of them are refiling. So we need to do a lot about innovation. Can you explain how disruption is in edtech companies? It's my favorite topic as I lived through it, but Devendu will not want me to talk about it.
You can share some insights, surely.
Share some insights. So I think, and are there disruptors to digital consulting? The answers you're asking me about sector-specific questions, let me answer that in one breath, which is to say that digital is disrupting several industries. There is no industry that I think is an exception to this. If you talk about consulting, there's a great conversation which I urge you to listen to. It's on HBR. It's between the McKinsey CEO and Clayton Christensen, and they're having this conversation about whether consulting is. So, McKinsey created something called McKinsey Tech Partners. They created this huge database on the Chinese customer, and they found that people didn't really want their solutions and the people that go with that tech product. They only wanted this data. So, they said, oh, here is like a modular product which has none of our key resources, which is people, solutions, etc. But people seem interested in it. Maybe there's a market for this. And they created tech solutions, which was just these analytics, modular, database solutions. And Clayton Christensen tells the McKinsey CEO that whatever you cannot be the firm you are and market this product. You will keep bringing it back into your trajectory. You will pull it up into your trajectory. And therefore, this is not something that you're going to own the market for. It's a fascinating conversation, but it tells you about a lot of potentially disruptive forces in consulting, modular solutions, analytics and database solutions, the gig economy, freelance consulting, and the growth of these. So that's a good article that you could refer to. EdTech is another one, and especially now, I think, with these forces starting to come into play, consumer behaviors, we don't know how, and increasingly incumbents are also responding to it, trying to be innovative and, responding to these forces through collaborations and proprietary solutions in the digital space. The question always for offline players in this case is what is it that we can do offline that cannot be replicated online? So, if you come into our classrooms, what is the killer experience that I can give you in a class that I'm not able to give you in this webinar, right? That's what I must grapple with as an instructor. And that's what every single offline incumbent needs to do. What is it that you can do that an Amazon can't? Pretty much nothing. But, because what happens, see, it's very insidious. Typically, what happens is there is a behavior, and incumbents use technology to respond to that behavior. Like, I will tell you how universities will think about this, right? We'll say, oh, there is a need for access in geographies that are not served by the university. There is that behavior. So let me respond to it, and I will respond to it and create a digital space. This is using technology to respond to a behavior. On the other hand, tech companies will create new behaviors using technology. An app. You never knew you wanted an app, but Apple discerned you wanted an app and created an app. Similarly, there is, and if you think about it, and like I said, I'm excited and I'm talking to you about it, but this is the subject of an entire class of, online commerce, which I do. For instance, if you think about Amazon, right, there is like, tell me, what do you think are the top battery sellers in online sales, right? Like leading online battery brands. What do you think these are? Tell me like 2, 3 leading battery brands online. Okay, Duracell, Energizer, Exide, Amazon, that Duracell, Nippon. So Amazon launches Amazon Basics, right? And the number within a year of launch of its battery online, within a year, it gets 30% of the market share. 30%. It launches 12 private labels, and this is a story, across most of the board. It gets 30% market share. Which brand? Imagine you're launching a product today and you're getting 30% market share. Right? It's insane. And how do they do it? Because they know the demand data at every point in the demand curve. They run a marketplace, right? First they're a retailer, then they're a marketplace where they bring together sellers and buyers. Then they integrate into seller role through their private labels and then sell to the market. Now they know what the demand is, and they don't stop there. What do? They start to own the entire ecosystem. Conversational search, right? They're listening in, and you say, Alexa, get me batteries. Alexa gets you batteries. And Alexa doesn't get you any batteries. Alexa gets you Amazon Basics batteries. And Alexa gets you Amazon Basics batteries because Alexa knows that when you ask for batteries, you don't say get me a Duracell, you say get me batteries. And therefore they know which categories you are brand agnostic in. And they enter those categories to command significant market share. It's an example of tech altering behavior, right? So those are the kinds of competitors that we're looking at as we move forward. So I think therefore it becomes very important to understand the difference between these business models and then respond to them. Okay, so I'm going to close now with yeah. Thank you for those comments. I'm going to close with GE. And here's a company that dared to transform itself. I like the GE story because, so far I've told you about, if you think about it, I said, okay, here are forces that are changing companies. Then I told you that, okay, here are companies that are, here is what constrains companies in responding to these. And GE is a good example of a company that dared to transform, right? Jeff Immelt essentially said that, 20% of the S&P 500 today belongs to companies that didn't exist a decade ago. I don't want to be that company. I'm going to change this company. And what he does, he brings in this simple technology, IoT, and in all of the industrial equipment that GE sells, he puts, he makes them smart machines, right? So instead of a product, now the product has been transformed in some ways into a solution, right? So you have this fundamental transformation of GE's products that start to happen, predictive maintenance, real-time maintenance. And I'm going to skip a few slides in the interest of time, and I'm going to tell you, this is how he starts to change the business model, right? Earlier you were just selling windmills, now you're selling business solutions, because in some sense, you're not just selling a windmill, you're selling a windmill with storage, and the ability to capture information about its environment, beaming that information to GE centers who are analyzing the data and creating solutions, saving these companies huge amounts of money that you see over there. They start to enter into outcome-based contracts with their clients. They say, we're not just selling windmills, we're selling you a business solution, and we keep a percent of this as our savings, right? So they start to do that. And as they do that, this product is now not a standalone product, but if you see here, it's a network product. If you see where my mouse is, it's a network. It sits at the center of an ecosystem where it's collecting data from all kinds of things in its environment and creating value for the client. And as it does this, GE starts to make this transition from a product to a service to a solution and ultimately a platform as it goes public with this product. This is a 2-hour session, folks. I'm sorry. It's truncated, but I wanted to just put this point across. The entire GE case is actually a 2-hour session, so I'm not getting into that in detail. But take my word that it's an incredible transformation, right? For a company to go from product to service to solution to platform. It essentially, Immelt said we are not in the business of, we are not in the business of just building industrial equipment. We are a software company. We will make smart solutions, and in the process, he amplifies. He brings in digital, he brings in digital resources, digital talent. He changes the business model. He participates across ecosystems, and he becomes a completely data-driven organization, right? All of this he does over a span of from 2014 to 2018. He beats the competency trap. Yet this is GE's story. Right? This is his lament in 2017, which he published in HBR. He says, through this entire transformation that he did, which was so large scale, the outcomes are significant, right? They've had huge fundamentals increase. They've paid more in dividends during his tenure than during the previous 110 years of GE combined. However, P ratio has gone from 50 to 17 in the past decade, and the stock price has underperformed. And he concludes that thus it is with transformation. It's an important point. If I go back a slide, G does everything right. Right? If you had a recipe for digital transformation, these are the 4 things. He did everything. He amplified the human talent with digital resources. He spun off, in some sense not spun off, but the digital organization in G would be completely autonomous and have the flexibility to craft this transformation in whatever manner it wanted. He built an ecosystem of partnerships with service providers, with technology companies, with startups to create scale at speed. He started bringing in capabilities to continuously analyze that data and derive cutting-edge solutions for his customers. He made all the right acquisitions. He did everything right. Yet, this was GE's lament. And this got me thinking about, yes, I mean, the story that I told you so far was a story of captivity by customers, but I was also curious when I saw this about another form of captivity. And that captivity, which incumbents face, is by investors. And here's another example of it. BMW, Tesla, dated figures slightly, but BMW has similar production levels for electric cars, has similar deliveries of electric cars, is profitable while doing these production and deliveries, but yet look at its market cap, similar to Tesla. When the markets value incumbents, they value them for current period profits. When they value digital disruptors, the tech companies, the tech entrepreneurs, they value them for growth. Look at what I've circled, right? So this is an article we wrote in the Harvard Business Review last year. We took all of the companies, public companies, and then we said, we broke down their valuation into valuation for growth and valuation for profits, current period profits. And what we found was very interesting, that investors value firms, incumbent firms, much more for current period profits. Investors expect current period profits from industry incumbents. Investors value firms for their growth potential rather than current profits when the case is startups and tech giants. So the runway, the resource runway that startups and tech companies get onto is fundamentally different from the ones that the incumbents are situated on. They expect growth, they provide them resources for growth, they value growth. Perhaps it is potential, but keep in mind that it's not just that. It is also a degree of market myopia where investors, typically transformations look like this, right? It's an inverted U curve. So markets, in some sense, as your profits decline, will start to undervalue you, not giving you the resources to drive that transformation, as was the case with G. And as your ability as a company to weather that trough and take it into the next zone and hold your investors and all of them constant with you as you go into the next zone is what will drive your ability to be successful with that transformation. And the ability of organizations to do this, it's easier for me to put this up in terms of how you do it, but the ability of organizations to do this is a significant source of competitive advantage. And therefore, digital transformation is not so much about developing new ideas. It is about escaping from old ones and old stakeholders. Your existing customers, your existing investors, all of these existing stakeholders hold you captive to a current business model. The ability to break free of that captivity is a huge and significant determinant of your ability to evolve and respond to disruption and reinvent your organizations and reinvent your industries. Okay, that's what I have to say in closing. I'll share a slide with you. You can look at this. These are questions for you to think about. Which business are you in? This is going to get redefined. We talked about this. Is the automobile industry in the business of cars? Is it in the business of mobility? How do you make money? You know, do you platforms, data-driven business models become a big thing here? What's your ecosystem? Who innovates with you? What is your value chain? How do you connect with your customers? Are you engaging with them in a traditional manner or a new manner? And how do you rebuild your organizations? Remember the big one there, navigate the dip in profitability as you make the transition. Wall Street, Dalal Street needs to be managed. And you cannot do it alone in the new economy. You absolutely need an ecosystem to create value. Okay. That is in closing. Debendu, I'm on time.
Yeah. You're perfectly on time, Deepa. Thank you so much. I'm sure the audience has benefited from the rich insights you shared. Interestingly, when you talked about the GE example, and from 2014 to 18, in 2014, I was working in GE in the Silicon Valley, in GE Digital, where the industrial Internet of Things was being played out, and GFP Milk in that Minds and Machines conference, he announced that GE will one night go to sleep as a hardware company and next morning wake up as a software services company.
Right. And we will go to sleep as an industrial company, and we woke up as a software company.
So, absolutely, yeah. So that was the discussion. But what I found there while working there was a lot of also internal opposition in terms of, like, for example, in GE Aviation, they jet engines they sold at huge profits. But then to shift to a services model, those were also challenges. But that's a discussion for a different day. But I'm as for the larger audience, I would say, at ISB, you would have heard about thought leadership. You would have heard about world-class faculty. This is what it feels like being in a session with the such faculty. Deepa has been a leader in our digital transformation journey at ISB too, and I proudly work with her in terms of taking ISB to the next level. She gave the example of Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and we don't want to be the Barnes and Noble. We want to ride on that Amazon wave. And while historically these schools have been operating on a more of a brick and mortar model, but we are also going digital in a big way. So I'm sure, as with most of you in different companies that you all are working in, you would be hearing the term digital transformation on an ongoing basis, and all of you are trying to reinvent yourselves so that you can retain that competitive advantage. So we will draw a close to this session now. I'm sure with respect to having more of such sessions you would be interested in. But again, as we say that you just saw the trailer for watching the entire movie, you have to apply to ISB possibly.
Actually, each of these are sessions unto themselves, so platform competition, disruption, business model reinvention, each one of these data-driven business and building experimental organizations, building data-driven organizations. These are all topics that one gets into as part of the tech strategy course. So I tried to give, some of this might seem rushed for you folks. I'm sorry about that, but it's as much as one can compress to make it also reasonably valuable as we go along.
Yep. And interestingly, the type of, so we have our, it's not only about faculty teaching in the classes, there's a lot of peer-to-peer learning happens. And also in ISB, you see a huge focus on our research work. So we have our research centers and institutes of excellence, and Deepa earlier mentioned, she heads the Srinu Raju Center for the IT and Network Economy. Likewise, there are other centers like Center of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, where a lot of work is going on with Microsoft in the area of artificial intelligence. So we are working with the industry, looking at not only today, but what is the future going to look like and how it is going to impact industries. You all would have heard time and again in your companies or otherwise that it's about staying relevant, equipping yourself with the right skill set. That's what ISB, our class at ISB actually focuses on, that you are equipped with the relevant knowledge and the relevant skill set. So we And also another aspect that critically always we look at when we consider top universities or B schools is the networking part. We have by next month we are going to have nearly 12,000 alumni distributed in 43 countries. I give an example since Deepa constantly talked about tech and the digital disruptions. I'll give you an example. Today, if you now you are not traveling, but if you are in a different city, you wake up in the morning, the first thing that you do is possibly check your mobile on WhatsApp. WhatsApp chief business officer was an ISB alum. Then you possibly go and take a shower, and Unilever CEO of Bangladesh is an ISB alum. Then you possibly take to go to work, you take an Uber, global chief product officer of Uber is an ISB alum. Then you work on SAP or an Adobe again. There, the managing directors have been ISB alums. At the end of the day, if you are coming back to your OYO hotel, CEO of OYO India and South Asia again happens to be an ISB alum. So we have phenomenal faculty, as you just saw, as well as great alumni network and a lot of other things which we would cover in our next session that is going to happen on Wednesday, 1st of April from 6 p.m. onwards, a webinar like this where our alums would be participating, the admissions team would be participating and answering you on all questions pertaining to ISB, learning at ISB, life at ISB, and more importantly and specifically about the PGPpro program.